That's why I told Speaker Johnson if he made that deal in exchange for $60 billion for Ukraine, I would vacate the chair, and I still stand by those words.
Oh my God, I hope that he does it then. Now, for the past several days, Marjorie Greene has been on a warpath against her own colleagues in the Republican Party. She's blasting House Speaker Mike Johnson for having the audacity to negotiate with congressional Democrats. For having the audacity to do his job, and she's lashing out at other Republican lawmakers as well. We'll get to them in just a moment, but let's stay on Mike Johnson for now. So Greene is threatening him because she does not want him to basically take up some of the border legislation that is currently being negotiated in the Senate. The emerging Senate package is expected to raise the bar for asylum seekers, something that Republicans want, to come to the United States, grant additional powers to remove migrants to control the border, another thing that Republicans want, and restrict the use of parole to admit certain migrants as they await processing for their cases. Yet another thing that Republican lawmakers have repeatedly told us that they want. But Marjorie Greene says that she is upset with the idea that Mike Johnson might actually consider voting for that legislation. Now, Johnson is being a little coy about whether or not he'd even take it up, but just the mere thought of it is what's riling Marjorie Greene up. And here's what he said yesterday after meeting with Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, Hakeem Jeffries, and others. Johnson, who has previously said the House would accept nothing short of its own Republican passed immigration package, it's known as HR 2, said Wednesday that all of that bill's elements are important and didn't close the door on a Senate package before he can review it. Quote, "We don't know exactly what the Senate has come up with because we've not seen the text," Johnson said at a news conference. "We're anxious to see the text of what they've done." Johnson also described Ukraine aid as a necessity, but added that we must insist that the border be the top priority. So long story short, he is willing to negotiate with Democrats in Congress, and that is exactly what's riling Marjorie Greene up. And Greene is trying to shut down any possibility of the House taking the Senate's deal. Here's what she said to Maria Bartiromo during their conversation.
If he passes that Senate border deal or so-called border deal, it's really an amnesty deal where Democrats are going to bring in millions and millions of illegals and turn them into Democrat voters. That's their plan, is to replace Americans with millions and millions of illegal aliens. And it upset me so much that this is the deal that Republicans in the Senate are making, and they want to do this in exchange for $60 billion more for Ukraine. Maria, our country's broke. We're like a corporation on the verge of bankruptcy with $34 trillion in debt. The border crisis is a national security crisis that has Americans everywhere. It doesn't matter how they vote. Americans everywhere are sick and tired and fed up with it.
You're not acting like this is important. She's not acting like it's important because she literally lied. The Senate, which is controlled by Democrats, is like, okay, fine. Let's give Republicans everything they want. Okay, let's give them everything they want. But here's the thing. People like Marjorie Greene, she is a symptom of the virus that makes Congress so sick that it's ineffective. Okay, because she doesn't care about getting anything done. All she cares about is posturing. All she cares about is pretending as if she's the purist, that she's really fighting for the people, when in reality she serves as a massive obstacle in getting any legislation passed. Listen, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, leftist, right winger, I don't care. Listen to this message because it's important, okay? We live in a democracy where half the country identifies as right wing, the other half identifies as left wing. So as a result, members of Congress, which represent the two different sides, need to negotiate and come up with legislation and compromise in doing so. And it's exactly people like Marjorie Greene who stand in the way. I can't stand this woman, I can't stand anything about her and people like her in the United States Congress. Congress is useless because of people like her. Cenk.
Yeah, so first of all, they said, okay, we want, and if you want the Ukraine aid, we want to address the border crisis. So the Democrats, as usual, go, yeah, we'll give you whatever you want, right? And now Marjorie Taylor Greene turns around and goes, not good enough. Well,
insane.
I mean, How can you do better than 100% of what you wanted? I mean, and the Democrats will give you 100% of what you want almost every time. So, and then they'll sing to their own voters, there was nothing we could do, there was nothing. So what do you want? You said what you wanted, you got it, and now you say it's not good enough.
Illusion of governance. Yeah. That is what Congress is, the illusion of governance. Because what they want to do, people like Marjorie Greene, she knows she's a useless hack. Okay, a useless, pathetic, attention-seeking hack. So what she wants to do, rather than her job, rather than legislating, rather than actually delivering for the constituents who elected her in the first place, she has decided to posture as someone who's fighting for them, when in reality, behind the scenes, she's serving as an obstacle to getting the legislation that they want passed. That's what's happening. That's the reality of the situation. Yeah. Useless hack.
Now, for all the Republicans, make up your minds. What do you guys want? So you say you hate the debt. Now, of course, when a Republican president's in charge, never once mentioned the debt or the deficit. It just happened. First of all, it happens for 8 years under George W. Bush, but now they're pretending that they weren't in favor of Bush when they were. But it's okay, Trump, they love Trump, right? So Trump was in office for 4 years. You know how many times the Republicans talking about the debt and the deficit? Zero, never, nothing.
No one cares about the debt.
They don't, they're liars, total utter liars. But okay, so you're pretending that you care about the debt now when Biden's in charge. By the way, why do they do that? Because they want Biden to be this schmuck who cuts Social Security, Medicare, other spending that are really, really popular, so he could crash in the polling, and then they could beat him and then laugh their ass off and get him past another tax cut for the rich. Marjorie Taylor Greene works for the rich, period, okay? So now, so they never say how they would cut it. Go ahead, say how you would cut it. Yeah. Every once in a while, they hint at cutting Social Security and Medicare, and then when their own voters yell at them, they scurry, right? So, okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene, how are you going to cut the deficit and the debt? And then give me a second thing that's essential if you're going to be a legislator. How are you going to pass it? So like I do constructive criticism all the time on the show. I explain how I would pass paid family leave. I explain the political pressure I would put on, why, how you can get the Republicans and the Democrats to vote for it, how you have the American people on your side, you could leverage them, use media, etc. The Republicans never do that. They just go, I want everything. I want the debt to magically disappear, and but I want more tax cuts for the rich. Well, how the hell would tax cuts for the rich help the debt? It would hurt the debt and the deficit.
It's so ridiculous. And look, I gotta be honest, even though Mike Johnson is someone who does not carry the same or hold the same values as me, we certainly disagree on policy. He's actually so far, okay, I hope I'm not speaking so soon, but so far not as bad as we were all bracing for. Because like the fact that look, they just passed another government funding resolution. Yes, it kicks the can down the road yet again, but he had to negotiate with Democrats to get that done because there were some hardliners, some Republicans who were like, no, we don't want to fund the government. Okay, well, he worked with Democrats in the House, and guess what? It passed. It was a bipartisan resolution. It passed 314 to 108. The Senate also voted on it 77 to 18 to approve it earlier in the day. Under the new measure, lawmakers agreed to extend funding for 4 of the 12 annual spending bills through March 1st, staving off a funding lapse for the Department of Agriculture, Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, Energy, the Food and Drug Administration, and other agencies. The bill also kicks a February 2nd deadline for the remaining government agencies like the Departments of Defense, Labor, Education, and Health and Human Services to March 8th. And despite all of this pressure and all of this whining and crying from the congressional virus, otherwise known as Marjorie Taylor Greene, he's brushing her off. Here he is speaking to the press about his decisions.
I have a job to do. We all have to do our jobs. Marjorie Taylor Greene is very upset about the lack of oversight over the funding and the lack of an articulation of a plan. As am I, all of us. Many
she doesn't care about a plan. She doesn't want any Ukraine funding, period. No matter what the White House says the plan is.
I understand that. Yeah, I've talked with her about it personally at great length, and she's made her position very clear. We have to do our job. We have to continue to ensure that we're covering all these bases, and we'll see how all this shakes out. I'm not worried about that. I got a job to do here.
Listen, again, politically, I disagree with him, but I respect what he just said there because it's true. He has a job to do. And he's probably feeling confident because since he's been willing to negotiate with Democrats in the House, if the far right, House Freedom Caucus tries to do away with him because of those negotiations, there have already been some Democrats who said, we'll step in and we'll vote to help him maintain the speakership.
Yeah, look, I'm actually a little bit more torn than you because, so Mike Johnson, we disagree with his social views, especially about controlling women's bodies, et cetera.
Of course.
To no end. That's a given. But look, on the one hand, you gotta pass some budgets so the government can function. So I appreciate that he got that done. And there was a lot in that bill that I hated. But I get it, they gotta pass a budget bill and they had to compromise. And if you don't like that, you shouldn't have voted for Republicans to control the House. Right? So I never vote for Republicans at the federal level because they always do monstrous things. But they won the House, so you got to come to a deal. On the other hand, at the end of the day, Mike Johnson, all of his social views are BS. He doesn't care.
Of course.
All he cares about is the donor money, just like the Democrats do. So Chuck Schumer and Mike Johnson are the same guy when it comes to economic issues. They're gonna serve the donors. So they came and I hate that. So okay,
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Yes.
And so the reason Mike Johnson's not worried about it is, and I pointed out, is because there's moderate, more like conservative corporate Democrats who go, yeah, I think we'll vote with him to keep him as the Speaker of the House. So even if he loses Marjorie Taylor Greene and a couple of Republicans, don't worry about it. Why? They have the same donors. So they're like, oh, this Mike Johnson's not so bad. He delivered for both of our donors. We're good, okay? But it's, again, they do have to pass a budget. So hence, it's not an easy calculus. Last thing, there is a way to cut the debt and do all of that. You raise taxes on the rich and on corporations. Over 3/4 of Americans want it. The only people who don't want it are all the liars in Congress who all pretend that they're populist right wing or they're progressive this or that, and they never ever do what 3/4 of Americans want. By the way, a majority of Americans also want to cut the defense spending because they can't pass an audit. They don't know where $400 billion is every year, right? But the people in government are never, under this system, are never going to give you what you want because they serve the donors, they don't serve the voters.
Final thing I'll say about this story is, other than Mike Johnson, Marjorie Greene is even lashing out at members of the House Freedom Caucus, the far right faction of the House Republicans, because apparently, one of them, Bob Good specifically, endorsed DeSantis first in the presidential primary. And then later, after it was clear that DeSantis wasn't gonna win the primary, decided to back Trump. And Marjorie Greene's politics start and end with Donald Trump. And if you dare to consider another candidate for president within the Republican Party, oh, that's a big no-no. So she's lashing out about that, crying, whining, go do your job. And if you're not gonna do your job and you're gonna threaten that you're gonna step down from committee assignments or whatever because you're so mad at what the Republicans are up to, then go ahead, do it. Do us all a favor and step down and shut up. I would love that. That'd be great.
Yeah, hashtag do it.
Hashtag do it.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member. And members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.